Imagine returning from a peaceful fishing trip to find your life's possessions dumped like garbage on the street. Your wedding photo cracked, your wife's jewelry scattered in the dirt. Your son and his sneering wife lock you out, declaring, "You're not needed anymore." But what if that betrayal uncovers a shocking truth? The house is yours. 3 days later, they're the ones in panic with 76 missed calls. This is no ordinary story. It's a masterclass in sweet, earned revenge that will have you cheering for justice. If you ever felt the sting of family betrayal and dreamed of turning the tables with clever, karma-fueled payback, hit that like button now. Subscribe for more gripping revenge tales that hit right in the feels, and comment below. What's the worst family backstab you've endured? Buckle up. This 50-minute saga of heartbreak to triumph is about to unfold. The first thing I noticed wasn't the house. It was a pile. My old pickup truck coughed to a stop in front of what used to feel like home, its engine rattling like an old friend protesting the end of our journey. And there it was, a chaotic mountain of belongings scattered beside the dumpster, like forgotten, refused from a life no one cared about. Cardboard boxes torn open at the seams, their contents spilling onto cracked pavement in a heartbreaking mess I couldn't yet comprehend. My heart skipped a beat, a cold sweat breaking on my brow as the realization dawned. Those are my things. The thought slammed into me before I even killed the engine, my hands gripping the worn leather steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, aching from the pressure. I climbed out slowly, my joints protesting with sharp twinges after 3 days of fishing up at Lucky Peak Reservoir. The cool May afternoon air carried the scent of impending rain, mixed with something mustier, the damp, earthy odor of clothes left exposed too long to the elements. My work boots crunched heavily on the gravel driveway, each step feeling like wading through molasses, heavier than the last as dread coiled in my gut like a snake ready to strike. There, half buried under a tangled heap of winter coats I'd worn through Idaho's brutal seasons, was the photo, our wedding picture from 42 years ago. The glass frame was cracked diagonally, slicing right across Martha's radiant smile, splitting her joy in two like a cruel omen. Dirt clung stubbornly to the silver edges I'd polished just last month, my fingers trembling as I brushed it away, the grit rough against my skin. Someone made a mistake. This has to be a mistake. But the evidence mounted like a rising tide, washing away any denial. My anniversary watch, the one Martha had saved 3 months of her housekeeping money to buy me, lay face down in a muddy puddle, its crystal shattered into spiderweb fractures. Water dripped from its soaked leather band as I picked it up with shaking fingers, the cold liquid seeping between my knuckles like tears I couldn't shed yet. My fishing gear, scattered everywhere, told a story of deliberate destruction. Tackle boxes split open, lures and sinkers mingling with kitchen utensils, and faded photographs in a jumbled grave. The rod I'd cherished for 20 years lay snapped in half, its guides torn away like broken teeth from a vicious fight. My chest tightened, breath coming in short, ragged gasps, the physical sensation of betrayal sinking in, a heavy weight pressing on my lungs. Someone had thrown my entire life onto the street with all the care they give actual trash. The boxes themselves narrated the haste. Hastily packed, roughly handled, corners torn where they'd been dragged or dropped without mercy. My name was still visible on one side, scrawled in Martha's careful handwriting from our last move, the ink now running in the damp air like a watercolor tragedy, blurring my identity into something unrecognizable. I found my work shirts in a wrinkled heap. The ones I'd worn in the factory for 30 years, oil stains embedded like badges of honor from endless shifts. Now they lay dirty and trampled, as if stomped by the very people I'd sacrificed for. My steel-toed boots, the good pair reserved for church and special occasions, sat upside down with mud caked in the treads, the earthy smell rising to mix with my growing nausea. What the hell happened here? The question burned in my chest like hot coal, my heart pounding erratically as I stood surrounded by the debris of my existence. Neighbors' windows remained dark and curtained, despite the obvious commotion. No one peeking out, no one offering help. The entire street felt hollow, like a ghost town where everyone was holding their breath, waiting for me to vanish. My phone buzzed against my hip like an unwelcome intruder. For a fleeting moment, hope flared in my chest, a spark of warmth amid the cold dread. Maybe Floyd calling to explain. Maybe a city official admitting to some bureaucratic error. But it was just a text from the bait shop, confirming my receipt from this morning's purchase. The normal world chugging along, indifferent to my crumbling one. I reached down, my back twinging in protest, and lifted Martha's jewelry box, its wooden surface scratched and one corner dented from rough handling. The velvet lining had come loose, flapping like a wounded bird, and her few precious pieces, simple earrings, a necklace from our early days, were scattered in dirt, her mother's ring coated in grime, lying next to a discarded bottle cap and cigarette butts. The sight hit me like a punch to the gut, my throat tightening as memories flooded in, Martha's soft laugh when she'd wear that ring on special nights. The reality settled over me like a thick, cold fog, chilling my skin despite the mild day. This wasn't random vandalism. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately packed up everything I owned and discarded it like refuse, making a calculated choice to shatter 40 years of careful preservation, 40 years of memories built brick by brick, 40 years of a life poured into family. I straightened up, my back aching from the effort, the house looming in front of me like a silent accusation, its windows dark, unwelcoming, the familiar porch now a barrier. I needed answers, my mind racing with fragmented thoughts, pulse thundering in my ears. I needed to understand why my entire existence was now a roadside spectacle, like a yard sale gone horribly wrong. Time to find out what's really going on here. I walked toward the front door, stepping over more scattered papers and broken picture frames, each crunch underfoot echoing my resolve. Each footstep felt deliberate now, purposeful, my fists clenching at my sides as anger began to bubble beneath the shock. Someone was going to explain this mess, and they were going to explain it right now. The key slid into the lock, turned halfway with that familiar resistance, then stopped dead. Cold metal refusing to budge, as solid and unyielding as if I'd been trying to open a bank vault with a butter knife. My stomach dropped, a wave of nausea rising as I tried again, applying more pressure, wiggling the key back and forth like I'd done 1,000 times before when it stuck on humid days. Nothing. The lock held firm, mocking me. They changed the locks. They actually changed the locks on my own house. My hands shook now, making it harder to steady the key, my breath coming in shallow bursts as rage and disbelief warred inside me. I pulled it out and examined it closely under the fading light, as if the brass might have somehow transformed during my fishing trip. Same worn edges, same scratches I'd memorized over years from endless use. The lock was different, not the key, a deliberate alteration that screamed exclusion. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy on the screen as I scrolled through contacts, heart hammering against my ribs. Floyd first. He'd explained this mess, sort everything out. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before clicking to voicemail, his voice cheerful and recorded, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning in my gut. "You've reached Floyd Riley. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." "Floyd, it's Dad," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I just got back from fishing, and all my stuff is on the street. The locks are changed. What's going on? Call me back right away." I tried Pamela next, though talking to my daughter-in-law always felt like navigating a minefield, her sharp tones and judgmental glances. Same result, straight to voicemail, her message shorter, crisper, like a door slamming. "You know what to do." Standing there on my own front porch, locked out like a stranger or a thief, I felt something cold and heavy settle in my stomach, twisting like a knife. This wasn't some mix-up or emergency repair. Someone had planned this meticulously. Someone had waited for me to leave town on my fishing trip, then systematically erased me from the place I called home for 15 years, the walls that held echoes of Martha's laughter and Floyd's childhood. The afternoon shadows stretched longer across the lawn, and the spring air carried a chill that seeped into my bones, goosebumps rising on my arms. I walked across the yard to Simon's house, my neighbor of 8 years. If anyone knew what happened, it would be him, the man who noticed everything, which newspapers people read, when they left for work, who visited and when. My knock echoed sharply on his door. 3 firm raps that reverberated in the quiet street. Footsteps approached from inside, cautious and measured, the floorboards creaking under his weight. The door opened just wide enough for Simon's weathered face to appear, his eyes darting past me toward the scattered pile, widening slightly before narrowing in discomfort. "Simon, do you know what happened here?" I asked, my voice low but urgent, gesturing back at the debris. "All my stuff is on the street, and I can't get into my house." His expression shifted, uncomfortable and evasive, his body language closing off, shoulders hunching, eyes avoiding mine. "Sorry, Otis. I haven't noticed anything unusual. Maybe some kind of mistake." Mistake? I felt a surge of frustration, my fists clenching at my sides as I pointed again. "That's 40 years of my life, sitting next to the garbage. Someone changed my locks while I was gone fishing. You had to have seen something." Simon's gaze flickered away, focusing on something behind my shoulder, his face paling slightly under the porch light. "I've been busy with my garden," he muttered, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Didn't really pay attention to what was happening over there. The lie hung between us like thick smoke, choking the air. Simon had been retired for 6 years and spent most days positioned at his front window like a sentinel, watching the neighborhood with the vigilance of a security guard. He knew exactly what had happened, but he wasn't going to tell me, his body language screaming avoidance as he gripped the doorframe tighter. "Look, if you need someone to make phone calls or wait for your family, you're welcome to." "Thanks, but I'll manage," I replied, my tone flat, disappointment settling like lead in my chest. He nodded quickly, relief flashing in his eyes. "Well, I hope you get it sorted out." The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing alone on his porch, the rejection stinging like salt in a fresh wound. Even Simon, who'd borrowed my tools and shared beers on summer evenings over backyard fences, was cutting me loose, his evasion a clear sign that whatever had happened, the whole neighborhood was in on it, or too scared to get involved, their curtains twitching but doors staying shut. I walked back to my belongings, each step heavier than the last, the gravel crunching underfoot like accusations. The pile looked even more pathetic in the fading light, like the remnants of someone's entire existence scattered for the world to see, vulnerable and exposed. I found an old lawn chair among the debris, aluminum frame bent but still functional, and set up next to the largest box, sinking into it with a sigh, my muscles aching from the tension. My phone showed no new messages. The screens glowed mocking me in the twilight. I tried Floyd again, then Pamela. Both calls went straight to voicemail, without even ringing this time, a deliberate silence that fueled a fire in my chest. Either their phones were off, or they were deliberately avoiding me. Given the evidence surrounding me, the calculated disposal of my life, I was betting on the latter, my blood pressure rising as frustration bubbled. The street grew quieter as dinner time approached, other houses showing signs of life. Lights flickering on behind windows, garage doors rumbling open as people returned from work, the faint smell of cooking wafting from chimneys. But nobody stopped to ask if I needed help or wonder why an elderly man was sitting among garbage bags full of possessions, their cars slowing but not stopping, glances averted. They all seemed to know something I didn't. A conspiracy of silence that made my isolation feel even more profound, my thoughts spiraling into dark corners of doubt and anger. I settled deeper into the chair, pulling my jacket tighter against the cooling air that nipped at my skin, the chill seeping through like the coldness of betrayal. Whatever game was being played here, I was apparently the only one who didn't know the rules, my mind racing with questions, heart heavy with the weight of unspoken hurt. But I'd learned patience in 65 years of living and stubbornness in 30 years of factory work, grueling shift that built resilience like steel. I could wait, my resolve hardening like calluses on my hands. They'd have to come home eventually, and when they did, I'd get my answers, the anticipation building like a storm on the horizon. The sky was beginning to turn purple at the edges, bruised like my ego, and streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows that danced across the pile. I checked my phone again, the screen's light harsh against the dusk. Still nothing, the silence deafening. But I wasn't going anywhere, my body rooted to the spot with a mix of defiance and desperation. Not until someone explained why my entire life had been thrown away like yesterday's trash. I had nowhere else to go anyway, the thought echoing in my mind, a lonely whisper in the gathering dark. For hours passed like a slow bleed, the chill deepening as night fully claimed the street, my fingers numb from the cold, breath visible in puffs. I'd sorted through most of my belongings by the time their car pulled into the driveway, its headlights sweeping across the pile like spotlights on a crime scene, illuminating the chaos in stark relief. Some things were salvageable. Clothes that could be washed, books that had only gotten damp, their pages warped but readable. Other items were ruined beyond repair, casualties of their hasty eviction. The sight of shattered keepsakes twisting my gut anew. The anniversary watch was definitely gone, its face clouded with moisture, hands frozen at 2:17 like a moment trapped in time. The Honda Civic's engine purred to a stop, and I stood up from the lawn chair, my joints screaming in protest after hours of sitting in the cool air, a sharp pain shooting up my spine. Relief flooded to me despite everything, warm and fleeting, a lifeline in the darkness. Finally, someone who could explain this nightmare. My heart raced with a mix of hope and trepidation. Floyd got out of the passenger side, his movements careful and deliberate, body language tense. Shoulders slumped under an invisible weight I couldn't identify, his face pale under the streetlight. He looked older than his 42 years, lines etched deeper around his eyes, as if the day's events had aged him prematurely. Pamela emerged from the driver's side with her usual brisk efficiency, her blonde hair perfect despite what must have been a long day, but her posture rigid, lips pressed thin. "Floyd, Pamela, thank goodness you're here," I called, walking toward her with hurried steps, gesturing at the scattered belongings, my voice cracking slightly with emotion. "What happened? Why are my things on the street? I can't get into the house." Someone changed the locks while I was fishing. Pamela didn't break stride, walking past me like I was a ghost, invisible and irrelevant, pulling grocery bags from the trunk with sharp, angry movements that rustled the plastic loudly. When she finally looked at me, her expression was cold enough to freeze water, eyes narrowing with disdain, lips curling into a sneer. "Because you're no longer needed here, Otis." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I actually took a step backward, blinking in confusion, my mind reeling as if slapped. "What do you mean not needed? This is my home. I live here." "Lived," she corrected, slamming the trunk shut with a resounding thud that echoed in the quiet night. "Past tense. The mortgage is paid off now. Your job here is done. Take your junk and get out." "My job?" The phrase made no sense, a nonsense syllable in the face of reality. My thoughts scrambling like scattered puzzle pieces. "Pamela, I don't understand what you're talking about. This is my house. I've been paying the mortgage for exactly." Her smile was sharp as broken glass, cutting through my words, her body language exuding triumph. Chin lifted, arms crossed. "You paid it off. Mission accomplished. We don't need you anymore." I turned to Floyd, desperate for sanity in this madness, my voice pleading now, hands outstretched. "Son, what is she talking about? Tell me what's going on here." Floyd couldn't meet my eyes, staring at the ground, his hands shoved deep in his pockets like a guilty child caught in a lie, shoulders hunched further. "Sorry, Dad," he mumbled, barely audible over the distant hum of traffic, his voice thick with unease. "We tried to make it work, but what?" I reached toward him, my hand trembling, and he actually flinched away from my touch, recoiling as it burned, the rejection stabbing deep. "Floyd, look at me. I'm your father. I've lived in this house for 15 years. I pay for the groceries, the utilities, the repairs. This is my home." Pamela laughed, a sound like breaking ceramic, harsh, brittle, and devoid of warmth, her head thrown back slightly in mock amusement. Your home? You were a tenant. Otis, a very useful tenant who paid all our bills and asked for nothing in return. But tenants can be evicted when they're no longer convenient. The cruelty of it stole my breath, my vision blurring as tears threatened, the words slicing through me like shards. I looked between them, my son avoiding my gaze, my daughter-in-law smiling with obvious satisfaction, the streetlight casting harsh shadows across their faces, making them look like strangers' cold, unfamiliar masks. I helped you buy this house, I said slowly, each word carefully measured to steady my shaking voice, my fists clenching at my sides. When you couldn't qualify for the mortgage, I co-signed. When you couldn't make the payments, I covered them. When you needed a down payment for Floyd's car, I gave you my savings. Everything I had, I gave to this family. And we're grateful, Pamela said with mock sincerity, her tone dripping sarcasm, eyes rolling slightly. Really, we are. But gratitude doesn't mean we have to house you forever. You're old, Otis. You take up space. You track mud through my clean house. You leave dishes in the sink and watch television too loud. We want our lives back. Floyd shifted uncomfortably, his weight rocking from foot to foot, but said nothing, his silence a betrayal louder than words. My own son, standing there while his wife dismantled our relationship with surgical precision. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, help with homework through long nights, supported through college with every extra shift I could take, reduced to a silent accomplice in my exile. Where am I supposed to go? The question came out smaller than I intended, tinged with vulnerability that made me hate myself, my voice breaking on the last word, chest heaving. That's not our problem anymore, Pamela snapped, heading toward the front door, grocery bags in hand, her steps brisk and dismissive. You're a grown man. Figure it out. Floyd, I tried one last time, putting every ounce of paternal authority into his name, my voice cracking with desperation. Look at me, son. He raised his eyes for just a moment, and what I saw there was worse than hatred. It was nothing, complete empty indifference, like I was already dead to him, a void that sucked the air from my lungs. The locks are changed. Pamela called over her shoulder without looking back, her tone final. Don't try to get in. I'll call the police if I have to. The front door opened and closed with a resounding slam, leaving me alone under the streetlight with my scattered possessions, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the night. The porch light came on briefly, then immediately went off again, a clear message that I wasn't welcome even near the entrance, the darkness swallowing me whole. I stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened, my body numb, mind spinning in disbelief. 42 years of fatherhood erased in minutes. 15 years of generosity forgotten like dust. A lifetime of love and sacrifice dismissed like an inconvenient bill. But beneath the hurt, a spark ignited, something harder and colder than the evening air, rising like bile in my throat. They thought they could use me up and throw me away like garbage. They thought they could steal everything I'd worked for and then lock me out of my own life. They were about to learn how wrong they were, my resolve hardening, fists clenching as the first seeds of revenge took root. The door clicked shut with finality that echoed through my bones, reverberating like a death knell. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the house that had been my home for 15 years, the place where I'd nursed Martha through her final days, raised Floyd from a boy to a man. The porch light went dark again, leaving me in the amber glow of the streetlight, shadows lengthening like accusations. 8 years. 8 long years since that conversation in the kitchen, when Floyd had looked me in the eyes and promised we'd always be family. His voice full of hope, hands gesturing excitedly. Dad, if you help us with the mortgage, we'll always be together, he'd said, leaning against the counter with that earnest expression he'd inherited from Martha, his eyes bright. This is our family home now. I could see him so clearly in my memory, the way his face lit up, Pamela standing beside him with her hair shorter than, her smile warmer, or maybe it just seemed warmer, because I wanted to believe it. my heart swelling with purpose. "You'll always have a home with us, Mr. Riley," she'd added, using my formal name like she always did back then. Her tone convincing, eyes meeting mine with what I thought was sincerity. How naive I'd been. How desperate to believe that my son still needed me, still wanted me around after Martha's passing 2 years earlier, the house feeling too empty, too quiet without her laughter filling the rooms. When Floyd called about their mortgage troubles, I jumped at the chance to help. Not just with money, but with belonging somewhere again, my hand steady as I signed the papers. "Family takes care of family," I told them, the pen scratching across the documents that made me responsible for their debt. "Of course I'll help." Floyd had hugged me that day. Actually hugged me. Something he hadn't done since his teenage years. His arms tight around my shoulders, a moment of warmth that now felt like a cruel joke. "I promise. Dad, you'll never regret this," he'd said, his voice muffled against my shirt. "Never regret this." The words tasted bitter now, like ash in my mouth, as I stood in the cold night air. I thought about the gradual changes, how the first few years have been good. Family dinners around the table, holiday celebrations with laughter echoing, Floyd asking my advice about work problems, his brow furrowed as he listened. I'd felt useful, my callous hands fixing things around the house, my presence a steady anchor. But somewhere around 2020, things began shifting subtly, like a foundation cracking under pressure. Invitations to dinner becoming less frequent, conversations growing shorter, my opinions dismissed with a wave or sigh. By 2023, I was eating most meals alone in my room, the aroma of their cooking wafting under the door like a taunt, my fork scraping the plate in solitude. Pamela would sigh dramatically when I used the kitchen, her eyes rolling, body language screaming intolerance as she wiped counters I'd already cleaned. Floyd stopped asking for advice, started looking through me instead of at me, his gaze sliding away like oil on water. They developed a language of glances and subtle signals that excluded me completely. Raised eyebrows, tight smiles, that made me feel like an intruder in my own space. But I told myself it was temporary stress. Floyd's job pressures, Pamela's moods, the usual ups and downs of family life. My internal monologue making excuses to preserve the illusion. I'd made excuses to them the way parents do, finding reasons to justify behavior that grew increasingly cold and dismissive, my heart aching but hope clinging like a stubborn vine. The pattern was clear now, viewed from this side of betrayal. The closer we got to paying off the mortgage, the worse they treated me, as if my usefulness had an expiration date tied directly to the loan balance. Every payment I made toward their debt was one step closer to my eviction. The numbers on the statements mocking me. They'd been planning this. Maybe not from the beginning, but certainly for months. You don't change locks on impulse, the metal cold and unyielding in my memory. You don't pack someone's entire life into boxes without forethought, the cardboard tearing under rough hands. This had been calculated, methodical, timed perfectly for my fishing trip. The scent of lake water and fresh air still lingering on my clothes as betrayal hit. 8 years of mortgage payments. 8 years of buying groceries, paying utilities, covering repairs. The bills stacking like accusations. 8 years of believing I was investing in family when I was actually funding my own disposal. The irony bitter on my tongue. The street was quiet except for the distant hum of highway traffic. A low rumble like approaching thunder. Other houses showed signs of normal family life. Television screens flickering blue behind curtains. Porch lights welcoming people home with warm glows. The faint laughter from within twisting the knife in my chest. But nobody emerged to check on the old man standing among garbage bags full of belongings. Their doors staying shut. Curtains drawn. Even in suburbia, people minded their own business when it came to family drama. The isolation wrapping around me like a shroud. I pulled my jacket tighter against the evening chill, the fabric rough against my skin, goosebumps rising as the temperature dropped. Standing here feeling sorry for myself wouldn't change anything, my internal voice stern, pushing back the wave of self-pity. Floyd had made his choice, and it wasn't me, his silence a final nail. Pamela had won whatever game she'd been playing all these years, her sneering face flashing in my mind. They'd gotten what they wanted, a paid-off house and freedom from the inconvenience of gratitude, their smiles triumphant in memory. But they'd made one critical error in their calculations. They'd assumed I was powerless. Then old man with nowhere to go would simply disappear quietly into whatever assistance programs existed for discarded parents, my thoughts darkening. They treated me like I was already dead, just a burden waiting to be buried, the anger simmering now, hot and steady. Time to show them how wrong they were, my resolve crystallizing like ice in the cold air. I turned away from the house and walked back toward my scattered belongings, my footsteps steady and purposeful on the gravel, each one a declaration. The pile looked different now, not like trash, but like evidence of their cruelty, items glinting under the streetlight. I approached my scattered possessions with mechanic's eye, assessing what could be salvaged and what deserved to be abandoned. 40 years of factory work had taught me to think systematically, to solve problems through careful analysis rather than emotional reaction, my mind shifting gears like a well-oiled machine. This was just another problem requiring a practical solution, my breathing steadying as focus took hold. The wedding photo went into the cab of my truck first, cracked glass and all. Some things were worth preserving regardless of damage. The frame heavy in my hands, Martha's eyes staring back with eternal warmth. Martha's jewelry box followed, along with a few pieces of her mother's costume jewelry that had survived Pamela's hasty packing. Not valuable to anyone else, but priceless to me. The velvet soft against my fingers, evoking scents of her perfume long faded. My work tools were scattered among the clothes and household items. The sockets that I'd owned for 30 years, still in perfect condition, gleaming faintly. The level that had helped me build Floyd's treehouse when he was 8 was scarred from use. These tools had value beyond sentiment. They represented skills and capabilities that Floyd and Pamela had forgotten I possessed, my grip tightening as I loaded them carefully into the truck bed. Each wrench and screwdriver finding its proper place in the toolbox with a satisfying click. Organization mattered. Preparation mattered. If I was going to rebuild my life from scratch at 65, I'd need every advantage I could gather. The thought fueling a quiet determination. The clothes were a mixed blessing. Most of my work shirts had survived intact, along with several pairs of jeans and my winter coat. The fabric rough but durable. The formal was ruined. The suit I'd worn to Martha's funeral stained and wrinkled beyond recovery, the sight stirring a pang in my chest. But I wouldn't need formal clothes for what came next, my mind already plotting ahead. A car slowed as it passed, the driver craning his neck to stare at the old man loading garbage into a pickup truck, tires crunching slowly on the asphalt. I met his gaze steadily until he looked away and drove on, a small victory in the midst of chaos. Let them stare. Let the whole neighborhood see what Floyd and Pamela had done. Shame was a tool that cut both ways. The whispers already starting behind curtains. My fishing gear had taken a beating, but most of it was salvageable. The broken rod could be replaced, and the tackle boxes just needed reorganizing, lures clinking as I sorted them. Fishing had always been my escape, my time to think clearly without interference. The scent of lake water still on my hands. The clarity I'd need in the coming weeks. Papers and documents were scattered like leaves after a storm. I gathered them methodically. Insurance policies creased but intact. Bank statements fluttering in the breeze. Tax returns smeared with dirt. Important information that Floyd and Pamela had thrown away as carelessly as everything else. Their disregard fueling my resolve. Did they think I existed only within the walls of their house? Did they imagine I had no financial life beyond paying their bills? That was their second critical error. They knew I had savings. They'd seen me write checks for their expenses year after year, but they'd never bothered to learn the full extent of my resources. To them, I was just a convenient source of monthly payments, not a man who worked steadily for 40 years and lived below his means. My savings a secret fortress. The anniversary watch was beyond repair, its crystal shattered, movement flooded. I held it for a moment, the metal cold in my palm, remembering Martha's pride when she presented it to me wrapped in newspaper because we couldn't afford fancy gift paper back then, her eyes sparkling. Then I dropped into one of the damaged boxes I was leaving behind. Some symbols of the past needed to stay buried. The thud final. Simon's house remained dark, though I could see the faint glow of a television through his living room curtains, probably watching me through a gap in the blinds, cataloging details he could share with other neighbors tomorrow. The whole street would know about Floyd's ingratitude by morning, though none of them would intervene. Suburban politeness had its limits. The isolation a bitter pill. 43 years I'd worked to support this family. First Martha and baby Floyd, when money was tight and factory jobs uncertain, sweat on my brow from overtime shifts. Then just Floyd through his teenage years, college tuition scraped together, early career struggles shouldered. Finally, Floyd and Pamela, helping them achieve the middle-class stability I'd never quite managed myself. My back bending under the weight. Time for a return on that investment. The thought igniting a fire. The truck bed was nearly full now. Packed with everything that mattered, I'd have to leave some furniture behind. The dresser Martha had refinished with loving care. The recliner where I'd watch television most evenings. Its fabric worn from use. But material possessions were just weight now. I needed mobility, flexibility, freedom to act without encumbrance, my movements efficient as I secured the load. I took one last look around the debris field that had been my life 2 hours ago. Amazing how quickly 40 years could be reduced to what fit in a pickup truck, the pile shrinking in significance. But reduction also meant distillation, keeping only what was essential, valuable, meaningful. Floyd and Pamela thought they'd won by throwing me away. They thought clearing me out of their house would clear me out of their lives, their sneers echoing in my mind. They'd underestimated the difference between disposing of someone and actually getting rid of them, my lips curling into a grim smile for the first time. I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine caught immediately. Reliable machinery, responding to experienced hands, a low rumble vibrating through the cab. In the rear-view mirror, I could see the house growing smaller as I drove away, its windows dark and unwelcoming, shrinking to a point. But I wasn't disappearing into the night like they expected. I was just changing positions, moving to higher ground where I could see the whole battlefield clearly, strategy forming like a blueprint in my mind. Time to show them what 43 years of experience looked like when it stopped being grateful, the road ahead unfolding like a promise. The Budgetin's neon sign flickered red against the darkness as I pulled into the parking lot, its glow casting long shadows across the asphalt. The place looked exactly like what it was, a highway motel for travelers who needed basic shelter without frills. 2 stories of identical doors, ice machines humming monotonously at each end. The persistent smell of highway exhaust mixed with industrial cleaning supplies, sharp and chemical. Perfect for someone who needed to disappear temporarily while planning his next move. The anonymity a bomb. The desk clerk was maybe 25, college-age with tired eyes and the practiced indifference of someone working a night shift. His uniform rumpled. He barely looked up from his magazine when I approached the counter, the pages rustling softly. "How many nights?" he asked, sliding a registration form across a laminated surface with a bored flick. "Just one for now," I replied, signing my name carefully, the pen scratching against the paper. "We'll see how it goes from there." Room 127 was exactly what I'd expected. A double bed with floral comforter that had seen better decades, faded and threadbare. A small table by the window with a chipped lamp. A bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. The tiles cold underfoot. The carpet showed traffic patterns from thousands of previous guests, worn paths like scars, and a heater rattled when it kicked on, a metallic clank filling the room. But it was clean, private, and $50 a night. I'd stayed in worse places during my factory years. Memories of dingy motels during out-of-town jobs flashing back. I carried my boxes inside one at a time, my back protesting with sharp aches after the long day, the weight pulling at my shoulders. The truck could stay loaded with everything else. No point unpacking what I just had to pack again, efficiency key. But I needed the essentials. Clothes for tomorrow, folded neatly. Martha's jewelry box, placed gently on the dresser, and a folder of important papers I'd rescued from the debris, their edges crumpled but contents intact. The fluorescent bathroom light was harsh after the warm glow of streetlights, buzzing overhead as I splashed water on my face, the cold shock grounding me. In the mirror, I looked older than I'd felt this morning. The day had carved new lines around my eyes, added weight to my shoulders, gray hair disheveled, but my hands were steady, my mind clear, focus sharpening like a blade. That's what mattered now, the reflection staring back with newfound resolve. I arranged Martha's jewelry box and our wedding photo on the bedside table, creating a small shrine of memory in this temporary space. The cracked glass splitting her smile in half, but her eyes unchanged, bright with the optimism that had carried us through 38 years of marriage. She'd known how to love without conditions, how to build rather than destroy, her voice echoing in my mind. Otis, family is forever. I should have done this years ago. I told her picture quietly, my voice soft in the empty room. Should have seen what they were doing before it got this far. But regret was a luxury I couldn't afford. The emotion pushed aside like clutter. Martha had died believing Floyd was a good man who'd take care of his aging father. I wouldn't dishonor her memory by letting her faith prove unfounded, the thought stealing me. The motel bed was firm but narrow, nothing like the king-size mattress I'd slept on for the past 8 years. The springs creaking as I lay down. Highway noise filtered through thin walls. Trucks downshifting with deep growls. Cars accelerating toward distant destinations with whooshes. Other guests moving to their own temporary existences, carrying their own problems from one place to another, the sounds of lullaby of transience. I lay awake most of the night, not from discomfort, but from mental activity, my brain buzzing like the fluorescent light. My mind was processing 8 years of gradual manipulation, cataloging moments I had misunderstood or ignored. How many times had Pamela made subtle comments about my age, my habits, my inconvenience, her voice dripping with false sweetness? How often had Floyd sided with her against me, without saying anything directly, his silence a complicit dagger? The pattern was unmistakable once I stopped making excuses for them, the realization dawning like a slow sunrise. Every kindness I'd shown had been treated as obligation, every sacrifice accepted as my natural duty. They'd trained me to be grateful for less, and less until I was grateful just to exist in their space. The manipulation a slow poison. But they'd made one fundamental miscalculation. They'd assumed that dependency ran only one direction, that I needed them more than they needed me, my lips pressing into a thin line. They'd forgotten that 8 years of mortgage payments created legal relationships beyond family sentiment. They'd overlooked the paperwork they'd signed when I helped them qualify for the loan, the documents now my weapon. By 6 o'clock in the morning, I was fully dressed and ready to act, the dawn light filtering through thin curtains, casting long shadows. The shower had been lukewarm at best, water trickling weakly, and the coffee from the lobby machine tasted like it had been brewed sometime last week, bitter and stale. But discomfort was temporary, a minor annoyance. What mattered was momentum. Moving forward with purpose instead of wallowing in self-pity, my steps firm as I loaded the truck. I loaded my remaining belongings back into the truck and checked out at the front desk. The same clerk was still there, looking even more tired after his all-night shift, bags under his eyes. "Everything work out okay?" he asked automatically, stifling a yawn. "Better than expected," I replied, meaning it, a small smile tugging at my lips. The morning air was crisp and full of possibility, invigorating as I breathed it in, the scent of fresh dew on grass. I had money in the bank, skills that were still valuable, and legal options that Floyd and Pamela didn't know existed. Most importantly, I had the advantage of being underestimated by people who thought they understood me completely, the thrill of impending justice quickening my pulse. Time to educate them about their mistake, the thought propelling me forward. I started the truck and pulled out onto the highway, the engine roaring to life, heading back toward Boise with the same sense of purpose I felt 40 years ago when I had started my first real job, the road humming beneath the tires. There was work to be done, problems to solve and justice to serve. Floyd and Pamela had wanted me out of their lives. They were about to discover that sometimes you get exactly what you ask for, the irony sweet. 3 weeks later, I returned to Boise with a tan that spoke of extended leisure and a perspective that distance had clarified. The sun-kissed skin a badge of my reclaimed freedom. The flight from Cancun landed on schedule, the plane touching down with gentle thud, and the taxi ride to my downtown apartment felt like visiting a different city. The spring weather had warmed considerably, transforming the landscape from the gray uncertainty I had left behind to something approaching summer optimism, flowers blooming along the sidewalks. Even the downtown streets looked more welcoming, though that might have been the effect of no longer feeling trapped by other people's expectations. My mind clear and unburdened. I was pulling my suitcase from the taxi trunk, the wheels rattling on the pavement, when familiar voices called my name from across the parking lot, sharp and urgent. Floyd and Pamela approached like refugees from their own lives. 3 weeks of searching had left visible marks. Their footsteps hurried and desperate. Floyd looked 10 pounds thinner, his usual neat appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and hollow eyes, dark circles underscoring his fatigue. Pamela's perfectly maintained image had cracked, her hair disheveled, makeup smudged, revealing someone who'd spent too many sleepless nights facing consequences she'd never considered possible. Her posture slumped. Otis, finally. Pamela's voice carried relief mixed with desperation, cracking on the last syllable as she wrung her hands. We've been looking everywhere for you. Floyd stayed slightly behind his wife, unable to meet my eyes directly, his body language defeated, shoulders rounded, feet shuffling. Dad, please, we need to talk. Don't sell the house. We can work something out. I set my suitcase down carefully, noting how their voices had changed. A month ago, they'd spoken to me with dismissive authority. Now they sounded like people begging for something they couldn't afford to lose. The reversal deliciously slow in its unfolding. Work out what exactly? I kept my voice level professional, arms crossed as I met their gazes steadily. What is there to discuss? We drove to every friend you've ever mentioned, Pamela said, words rushing together in a torrent, her eyes wide with panic. Your old co-workers at fishing club, even Martha's sister in Twin Falls. Nobody knew where you'd gone. We were desperate. The word hung between us like smoke, desperate. A month ago, I'd been the desperate one, sitting among garbage bags while they locked me out of my own house. The symmetry was almost poetic, a slow-motion satisfaction building in my chest. Interesting choice of words, I replied, picking up my suitcase handle with deliberate calm. A month ago, you told me I wasn't needed anymore. Remember? Floyd finally looked up, his face showing the kind of regret that only comes from watching comfortable assumptions crumble in real time, tears glistening in his eyes. Dad, we made a mistake. Maybe we spoke too quickly, acted too harshly. Maybe. The word came out sharp and intended, my tone cutting. You threw my belongings on the street like garbage. You changed the locks on my own house. You told me to disappear from your lives. And now you're surprised that I took your advice? In the end, justice isn't always about loud confrontations. Sometimes it's the quiet reclaiming of what was yours all along, letting karma deliver the lessons you couldn't teach. This story shows that family bonds, when broken by entitlement, can lead to profound self-discovery and freedom. Respect is earned, not owed, and underestimating someone's resilience invites downfall. Reflect on that. True strength lies in walking away stronger. If this revenge saga gave you that rush of justice and left you rooting for the underdog, smash that like button. Subscribe for more epic tales of betrayal turned triumph, and share your own revenge story in the comments. What's the ultimate payback you've witnessed or dreamed of? Click the next video box for another heart-pounding story. See you there.